So now it's time to start Dragonfly and Ember. So, second book in the series. And not gonna lie, not looking forward to it, no. In the past, when I've read the series, or at least tried to, Dragonfly and Ember was the hardest one to get through. And I'm not the only one that feels this way. A lot of people have issues getting through this book. I think it's because of the major spoiler the woman gives at the beginning of the book and in the summary of the book. Don't worry, I'll read it. And I think it just kind of brings everything down. And I've only been able to read through it once successfully. Anytime I tried reading through it again, I couldn't make it through. So I'm determined to get through it again. And since I haven't watched the series in a long time, I'm hoping the same thing will happen as it did when I reread Outlander, that I'm able to immerse myself with it because I'm not constantly comparing the book with the TV show. So fingers crossed I can get through it successfully without incident this time around. I'm getting through it regardless because I'm determined to have this book series read, especially with the final season coming out next year and the new book coming out eventually. So Dragonfly and Ember is roughly 747 pages, 743 pages with this edition that I have. Now, if you watched my last video, you saw that I managed to get my eye on an original copy. This was published back in 1992. Yeah. And it was fairly well taken care of. I got it off a website called penguilbooks.com. So shout out to them. Thank you very much. And it's just so beautiful, you know? The reason I decided to get an original copy and just go down that rabbit hole was mostly because of Dragonfly and Amber. I felt that maybe it's the copy of the book I have. That copy of a book that I had, fairly decent copy, was used, but it was very well taken care of. I got it at a reputable used bookstore. But I don't know, something about it always just felt wrong to me whenever I was trying to read through it. So I'm hoping that with this copy, I'll have a better time. Plus, these covers are so pretty. I don't know why they discontinued them. Come on. Book lovers, especially fantasy lovers, love a beautiful book cover. Bring it back. People would be so excited. I promise. Anyway, Dragonfly and Amber. Let's see what it's about, shall we? Clara Randall, successful physician, recent widow, mother, has returned to the Scottish Highlands with her nearly grown daughter to look up a young historian she met briefly some 20 years earlier. Alrighty, that's the problem with the book. You give us the biggest spoiler of all, and the book hasn't even started. Yeah. But why does she come back? What does she know about the rim of standing stones on nearby Craignadoon? And who is really the father of her beautiful copper-haired daughter, Brianna? That's kind of a duh. The question raised by Claire's reappearance led her back to the far, far distant past, back to Jamie Fraser, the young Scottish warrior whose gallant attention drew her from the security of her own life to the dangers of his. Together, Claire and Jamie struggled to save a country and thwart a king. Their love affair, as brilliant as the span of the dragonfly wing and as enduring as the glowing depths of ancient amber, takes them from the intrigue-filled Paris courts of Charles Stuart to the warring clans of a Scotland gripped by fierce Jacobite rebellion. Theirs is a story about the power of kings, the dangers of ambition, the agony of choice, and finally, the terrible burden of too much knowledge. Ooh. In the hands of this masterful storyteller, history is neither dead nor fixed, but a thing coiled, fluid, and alive. For Claire, the exonerable march of fate toward the Highlanders, doom of Culloden Moor, raises questions that lie far beyond the timeless stones. I like that summary a lot better than the later summaries it did for the later editions. Like, why are they breaking things that aren't broken? And that's just not for the books, that's for today's society in general. Why do they keep breaking things that aren't broken? Stop it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and give this book a fair shot. I'm going to finish it one way or another. Hopefully it doesn't take me as long as Outlander, but we'll see how the rest of the month goes. I did have every intention of starting this book about a week ago, but because I decided to go on my original cover quest, it took me a little bit longer. So I'm a little late starting, but I'm going to make up for it. I'm going to read. I didn't want to get this book done in 2 weeks. Probably not going to be 2 weeks, but I'm going to give myself until October 1st. So yeah. But it's September 3rd. I'm giving myself till October 1st, roughly 27, 28 days. And then go from there. If I'm finished, great. If I'm not, I'm going to be back here anyway, giving you an update. But regardless, I'm going to get this book done. I'm going to read the entire series in chronological order. I know after Dragonfly and Amber, it's actually another character's book. I'm not going to talk about this character until after I finish Dragonfly and Amber. But if you know who I'm talking about. So regardless, gonna get this done. Gonna get this read. I'm rambling, repeating myself. You already heard this. So it's time for me to go read. I'll see you soon. If I didn't say it regarding the summary, I'm going to say it regarding the first part of the book. Having it start in the future, telling us that Jamie and Claire end up getting separated. Why? Why would you ruin that? Why would you spoil that? But then again, it is kind of genius. And we meet Fergus. And it is October 2nd. Oops. Well, better late than never. Progress report on Dragonfly and Amber. Almost halfway. I am on page 313, made it to part 4. So not too bad. I am at the part where, if you know, you know, and if you don't, you're going to get spoiled. Jack Randall is back. And Claire has to make the hardest decision she has ever had to make in her life. And I'm talking harder than when she chose to stay with Jamie over going back to her husband. She has to ask against her better judgment, against all her good faith, against everything that just makes her love for Jamie be as epic as it is. She has to ask him the one thing a wife should never have to ask her husband, who's been through such trauma. She has to ask him not to kill the man that brutally, I can't say the word here, but it's, And why does she do it? She does it to save the future. Oh, yeah. She lost the baby, and she basically has to whore herself in order to save Jamie. Ian is a treasure. And as much as I love Jenny, he's too good for her. He's only a boy, I exclaimed. He can't weigh more than 15. 16. And thus we meet Lord John Grey. My French is very rusty. So, ne peut-être plus que votre cul? It said with satisfaction. Don't fart above your arsehole. You know, I love the fact that Jamie has so much confidence in his wife that he doesn't even need to protect her against a group of savages because they're all superstitious bastards that think she's a witch. Well, maybe. Don't move, Sassenach. Jamie's voice came softly next to me. Just for a moment, Nundun. Be still. I obligingly froze until he touched me on the shoulder. That's all right, Sassenach, he said with a smile on his voice. It's only that you look so beautiful with the fire on your face and on your hair, waving in the wind. I wanted to remember it. Imagine if Jamie had lived during the 20th century, what the man could have done with a paintbrush or a camera. And I did it. I finished. And as you've noticed, I finally made it. I finished Dragonfly and Amber. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have finished this book. And I will say it is a good book. Don't get me wrong. It's not a bad book. Not at all. It's a very well written book. It's just a lot of, do we really need to read about this kind of stuff? And you kind of do need to read about it, whether you like it or not. It's just, okay, fine. That's why we have to know about that. But do we have to drag it out that long? It's just basically a lot of that. And it's mostly in the time when they're in Paris that you have to go through that. So, yeah, after you get through Paris, it's kind of hard to put down because it gets so good after Paris. It's, the parts with Paris are the parts that really just get to me. So that's my little spiel. Anyway, as I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of her spoiling the book in the beginning, but you kind of understand why she has to. It's kind of like when How I Met Your Mother. You know he's the mother, but you need to know why he met the mother, and you need to know how he met the mother, which is the premise of the show. The same here. You have to know why she is where she is and what her decision is behind it. So that's basically it. And regardless, I still think it brought the rating down. Overall, I give this book a good solid 7. Yeah, a 7. So not as high as Outlander, but it's still a solid read. It's still a good sequel. give them that, it's still a decent sequel. Especially when we get to the part Culloden, when we get to the wars. It's really hard to put down. So, the way I managed to finish this book is, I remember mentioning in a previous video that the original copy I had of Dragonfly and Amber was a used copy I bought. I don't have that copy anymore, I give it away. But it's that, forgive me for saying this, but it's that ugly yellowish orange color copy that they have of the book. And I hate that cover. I am not a fan of the new covers, FYI, just so you know. Anyway, I hated that copy of that book. And I think that attributed to me not being able to finish a book, because it's just everything about the way that book felt in my hands, even though it was in good condition, everything the way that book felt in my hands just felt cringeworthy. I couldn't do it, which is probably why I had such a hard time getting through Dragonfly and Amber again. So getting these new copies made all the difference. And ironically enough, I primarily read from this copy right here. Yeah, the one that was a bent up cover and ripped pages. I mostly read from this copy, and it helped out. Because, one, it's small, so I can easily fit it into my work bag and take it with me to work and read during my downtime, which is how I mostly read this book, was during my downtime at work. And also, it allowed me to air out some pages, since, this book has already been heavily abused. So there was no guilt there. Yay! So it really helped. So, and I'm thinking about doing this for the rest of the series too. Getting the smaller copies to go with the larger copies. That way it's easily portable. Nothing against ebooks. I do have the ebooks as well, but for this series, I feel that reading a page as opposed to a screen is just the way it's supposed to be read, And plus, my workplace doesn't like for us to, have electronics on the floor. So there's that. So, yeah. But regardless, it was a good, solid read. I loved it. 7. So, even though I loved it, I didn't love it that much. I will say that Claire having to leave Jamie for the sake of the child they created together, it was probably the hardest part. And I was tearing up when I read that. It's like, yeah, how do you do that, And that was honestly the hardest decision Jamie had ever had to make in his life. And I just cannot blame him for that. And then you have all the magnificent side characters you meet throughout the story, of course. You meet Mary, so I liked Mary. I wish we could have seen her in more books. I liked that she was very timid and nervous. And it's like she reminds me of certain people I knew growing up. Not myself, but other people. And I like that she kept that sensitivity about her, that sensitivity never left her. I liked that about her. And that she wasn't ashamed in the end to show how strong she was. At first she was always so timid, she was ashamed that she was strong. I don't know if that makes sense, but I like that in the end she was no longer ashamed of being strong. She finally gave in to the will to be strong, which allowed her to do what she had to do. Major spoiler alert, she had to marry that evil bastard Jack Randall. Even though she didn't love him. Why did she marry him? Again, another spoiler. She fell in love with his brother, Alex, who was the complete opposite of his brother. Instead of being evil and vindictive and dirty, he was kind and loving and passionate. And he was just given a really crap end of the stick when it came to his health, which didn't allow him to do much with his life. And he died young. But before he died, him and Mary fell in love. And She ended up getting pregnant. And back in those days, as you more than likely are aware, keep in mind this is in the mid 1700s in Europe, mostly England and Scotland. If you are having a baby out of wedlock, you're basically doomed. And he didn't want that for her. So I imagine he made the tough decision of his entire life and said, brother, marry my wife. Won't marry my lover because she's going to have my baby. And this is the only way I can ensure she will not have a doomed life. It is the only good thing Jack Randall ever did in his entire life. That's it. That's all I have to say. Only good thing. And then you have your other characters as well. You have the Duke of Sanindrim. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And he's total douche. And I love what happens to him. Although I liked it a little more in the TV show. And I think because in the TV show, they get a little more graphic with what happens to him. And I'm all for it. So. And you have the nuns. They're a joy. And you have Claire's bestie from France, and she kind of gets on my nerves a little bit, but at the same time, it's like I can see why Claire loves her. And you of course have Charles Stewart, who really existed, and yeah, if you know history, you know what happened to the Scots in real life. If you don't know history, it's because I'm no expert, but this is what I've read up on. It's because of the fact that he wasn't very experienced when it came to battle and war and just overall combat and soldiering, military, nothing. He wasn't at all educated in it. He basically relied on the people around him who were. But he got overzealous. He got confident. And he's like, I'm going to take my men into battle and we're going to win. And it was the dumbest thing he could have done. Because for one, they were seriously outnumbered. Two, the way they had won all their battles prior, the Scots versus the English, was that they were always on uneven battlefields, meaning they were in areas that were never, ever easy to watch. There's always hills. There was always some type of terrain. There was always something to where the Brits were like, okay, I need to watch my pretty little shoes. I can't keep my eyes on everything, which allowed the Scots to react and attack. That's how they won their battles before. Not Culloden. Culloden is said to be nothing but flat terrain, easy to spot a fly, which meant that the Scots were easy pickings. Because for one, they were outnumbered, like I mentioned. And two, they were exhausted and starving. The battle lasted less than an hour. You read it up in textbooks and in history. This battle actually happened and it lasted less than an hour. And it was because of that battle the Scots lost the clans. And I'm no Scot, so don't ask me, but from what I understand, Scotland was just never the same. Shame. And she wrote it beautifully, so beautifully. She doesn't go into the actual battle, but she wrote the part of them just trying so hard to stop this battle, and when they realized they couldn't stop the battle, to at least win the battle, and when they knew that that wasn't going to happen, to at least cherish every single second they could before they had to part. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. The last third of the book was amazing. If I could break this into parts, I would say that the first part of the book, a 6. Sorry, it's a 6. And that's up until they leave France. After they leave France and go back to Scotland, that goes up and it becomes easily a 9 or a 10, So there you go. That's why it averages out to a 7. I will say there are a lot of content in here that is going to be tough to read. Trigger warning, of course. Check them. And one of those trigger warnings is the fact that Claire loses a baby. If you've read Outlander or you've seen the first season and haven't gone into the second season or second book, you know that Claire is pregnant. Well, she loses that baby. And it's pretty devastating. And it was hard to read, you know. I am fortunate enough that I've never lost children. But I know there are plenty of other women out there that would just not be able to read those parts. So check that, yeah. And then there's a lot of depictions of SA. And you definitely want to check for that. And there's other stuff as well. Keep in mind, this is during a time when these books didn't need to have trigger warnings labeled. You just went in, dived in, and if you could deal with it, you dealt with it. If you couldn't, you DNF'd it, and that was it. So, if you're not sure of the triggers, look them up before you dive into these books. Just FYI. Going back to the side characters, we also meet Fergus. I love Fergus. Fergus becomes a prominent player within the series, and he's a little French boy that Jamie meets, befriends, and also fathers. Not biologically anyway, because he meets him like he's 10, but anyway. He's an adorable pickpocket with that adorable French voice, who's brave and strong and eager to please. Love Fergus. I love him more as he gets older, FYI. And then we got the old regulars, of course. We got Murtaugh. Love Murtaugh. Yes, I love me Murtaugh. Who doesn't love Murtaugh? Come on! And you got Dougal, which is, yeah. Don't hate on, but it's like, yeah, Dougal. And you got Jenny, of course. Love me some Jenny. But you also have Ian. You know, I am discovering as I'm reading these books all over again that I love Ian. I love this guy. It's just, I don't know if you saw my first review when it was about Virgins, which is the prequel to Outlander, but everyone needs an Ian. Why? I'll tell you. Ian went to war with Jamie before the events of Outlander. And he ended up losing his leg. So he's walking around on a stump like you see pirates in Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever. He has a real life stump going on. And he doesn't let that stop him from doing what he needs to do to take care of his family, to take care of the land, to earn, just to be him, you know? He doesn't let it stop him. There is a part that I really enjoyed. It was after they returned to Scotland. They went back to Lallybroch. That's the home that Jamie goes to. It's called Lallybroch. And his sister, brother-in-law, Ian, they are taking care of it for him while he's on and off. And the war is about to start. And Jenny, because she's such a proud woman and she does not want her husband to feel less than a man, goes up to her brother and says, "Take my husband to war with you." What the fuck? They have kids. They just had like their third kid when this is happening. And not to mention they got farm, they got to make an income, they got a home, they got tenants. What is going on? And Jamie doesn't want to. Because he knows Ian. He's known Ian his whole life. They're best friends. But Jenny asks him because she feels that if he doesn't feel included in this, he's not going to feel like a man. And she can't have that. So, Jamie, being the good younger brother he is, agrees. Goes and asks Ian. They have a nice, humorous fight. It's so funny. It's great. It's one of my favorite chapters. And in the end, Ian says, "Are you ordering me to go to war with you?" And Jamie's like, "No. I'm your friend. I'm asking you." And Ian's like, "Well, I appreciate that, friend, but I'm not going." I love Ian. Love him. So, the book ends with Claire going back to the stones, going back to her time. And then we skip back into 1968, where we are with Roger and Brianna. Brianna is Claire and Jamie's daughter. Roger, we met in Outlander. He is the adopted son of the Reverend, who was very good friends with Frank. And we discover that, of course, they have a hard time believing Claire and her story, because, come on, it's very far-fetched. It's like, you're telling me you went through time 200 years in the past, fell in love with a Highlander, kind of had an affair, got married, got pregnant, lost a baby, got pregnant again, and then decided to go to war, and you're like, oh no, I'm pregnant, I have to go to the stones, or otherwise you're going to die. Yeah, that was the gist. Brianna, of course, has a hard time believing this, and why shouldn't she? Come on. But Roger, he actually doesn't have that hard of a time believing her. He, of course, is a little bit skeptical, you know. In case I wasn't mentioned, Roger is an historian. He took after his father. And as far-fetched as the story is, he can't help start thinking, just maybe could this be true? And then she starts showing him these little things here and there, and he's even more convinced. And in the end, he does research on her behalf. Some of it she asked him to do. She wanted to check up on some of the soldiers that she knew fought in the battle, wanted to see what their fates were. But she asked him specifically in the beginning of the book, don't look up shit on Jamie Fraser. I already know what happened to him. I don't need any more info. Don't go look him up. Well, he did anyway. He defied her. And the way it ends, he tells her he went to Culloden, but he didn't die there. And that's where it ended. We discover that Jamie survived the battle. How? We don't know. I have to go into Voyager for that, which I'm going to be starting soon. But before I start Voyager, I got to talk about some other side character. Who's that character, you may ask? He's a favorite. Lord John Grey. Why do we like Lord John Grey, huh? Well, we love him in later on in the series because he's pretty badass. He's so handsome. Oh, it's not to love, honestly. But when you meet him in DragonFly and Amber, he's such a little shit. You're like, how? The way they meet is they're on the road on the way to war, and Lord John, this is before he's a lord, FYI. He's a 16-year-old little shit when they meet. He's trying to take out the Scots by himself. He's like, I'm gonna win the war by myself. Okay. Of course, this backfires. Jamie and his crew capture him, and they trick him into getting information out of him. And he actually becomes indebted to Jamie. And if it wasn't because of this debt he owes Jamie, he would have died at Culloden. So he's kind of responsible for him surviving that battle. How do I know this? Oh, because I've seen the series, and it follows the book series really well. Plus, I read Voyager once, and we do meet more of Lord John in there. So I'm looking forward to rereading all about him. But before we get more into Lord John and everything that happens in Voyager, we are going to start the next book in chronological order, as I mentioned, in the series, which is a novella called A Fugitive Green. So that's where we're going to start next. But all that aside, Dragonfly and Amber, I give a 7. Like I said, mostly because of the beginning and Paris. But once you're able to get through the beginning in Paris, it's a really good read. You just can't put it down. You just got to keep churning those pages. You need to find out what's happening next, you know? So, very, it's satisfied. I'm satisfied. Yeah, it's good. And I'm looking forward to reading the novella and going from there. All right, so I've rambled on long enough. This is actually, it was a lot longer than I expected. I was not expecting to talk this long, so sorry. But first, we're going to get into Fugitive Green, and we'll go from there. So I'll see you guys soon. Bye.